The reading that Bill provided for us today is entitled The Cat Who Thought She Was a Dog and the Dog Who Thought He Was a Cat, with apologies to Isaac Bashiva Singer. Once there was a poor peasant who lived with his wife and 3 daughters in what is now Poland. Their simple hut was far from the village. It had no mirror. A mirror was a luxury, and why would peasants be curious about their appearance? But this peasant did have a dog and a cat. They were born the same week. Since the dog had never seen another dog and the cat had never seen another cat, the dog thought he was a cat, and yes, the cat thought she was a dog. They lived on good terms, eating from the same dish and trying to copy each other. A peddler frequented the area, but did not go to the peasant's house because he knew that the peasant had nothing to sell and was too poor to buy. Nevertheless, one day the peddler did stop and showed the wife and daughters his pretty doodads, rings and yellow beads and false pearls and colored kerchiefs and such trinkets. But what enthralled these unlikely customers most was a mirror set in a wooden frame. While it was much too expensive, the wife offered to pay a little each time the peddler came by. The peddler knew the family was poor but honest, and that a mirror could easily break in his sack. So the peddler agreed. Commotion soon ensued. Before, they had only seen themselves as reflections in the water barrel. Now, each became dissatisfied with their appearance. A missing tooth makes me ugly. My nose is too snub and broad. My chin is too long. Freckles will keep me from finding a husband. My teeth protrude like a buck's. Each person found vanity that they had not had before, and each thought that money could solve their problem. For the first time, the family felt its poverty, and the family envied the rich. The cat and dog were not immune to this confusion. The cat was perplexed by her image, and the dog was enraged. For the first time in their lives, they turned on each other. The family had to put the dog out of the house. Both stopped eating. The father decided that the family did not need a mirror. He put the mirror away and later traded it back to the peddler. He got kerchiefs and slippers instead. With the mirror gone, the dog and cat returned to normal. The dog once again thought he was a cat, and the cat once again thought she was a dog. The daughters found themselves finally, and again, in time, made good marriages. Hearing what had happened, the village priest said, "A glass mirror shows only the skin of the body. The real image of a person is in willingness to help their family and all those they come in contact with. This kind of mirror reveals the very soul of the person."
I really like that story. It's included with apologies to Singer, who wrote it and translated it from the Yiddish. So my recasting of part of it to make it appropriate in length, which I hated to do, but it needed to fit, deserved the apology. I like it for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that it's the priest's observation is this message about self-knowledge and being one's true self, and how that can be measured not only by others, but by oneself. And I like it because it reminds me of my uncle for whom I was named, and my son, my older son, each of whom had dogs, and their lives did not overlap, but each of whom had dogs and cats that would curl up together and were indistinguishable in their own minds, one might think. And I like the story because it reminds us of the knowledge, including self-knowledge, that can be found in lore, in the stories, in the memories, in the false memories that remain because they speak in a greater way. This is World Quaker Day. This is an occasion to think about other Quakers and how we fit into that world, and to think about how Quakerism fits into the larger world of spirituality and Christianity and the world beyond thoughts of religion. And when I have listened to people describe Quakerism, and I've done that, it seems to me that they only use one part or the other of the instructions we were given in the 5th grade when our teacher said compare and contrast. And there's value in each, which is why your 5th grade teacher told you that, and to teach you how, but somehow we seem to not seize upon that when we're talking about something that matters and to which we have an attachment. But Quakerism has some distinctives that go across the lines of form of worship, of theology. And we're going to talk about a couple of them today. And one is our decision-making process. And our history at New Garden, or at least as it's carried forward in the lore, is that over here on the corner of Friendly Avenue and New Garden Road, our corner, this corner, is part of our grounds and has trees and grass, and it's and it helps this place have the feel that it has. And the lore from long before I came here is that the practical leaders, aware of monetary things, wanted to sell this corner for a service station to be built. And the story goes that there was one person, yet again, we were led by women, and she was intent that this would not happen. And in the face of good weather and bad illness and strength and age, she never missed monthly meeting, because that wasn't going to happen. And in the fullness of time, that idea was set aside, and the financial needs of our work and this meeting were otherwise met. Bill Rogers used to say that the way Quakers make decisions is very inefficient. That we go straight. You tell me if I'm wrong. That Quakers will go very slowly in a straight line rather than going fast like that. And that speaks to me. It reminds me of you know, we have this meeting house here and part of our lore as new gardeners is that it took 25 years to decide to build this meeting room. And as the story came to me, and maybe was tinkered with by me in my memory, this issue was important. Everybody agreed to that all along. But it was the kind of issue that was dealt with by House and Grounds and Stewardship and Finance committees that was about the business of the meeting. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen for a couple of decades and longer. And then something different was done. This question was sent not to Stewardship and Finance and House and Grounds. It was sent to Ministry and Council. It became a question of worship, spirituality, leading. And this experience gave life to the notion of meeting for worship with attention to business, because not only was it dealt with differently, the decision was different. The meeting, our predecessors had gone in this slowly in this straight line. And what resulted was this wonderful meeting room, this area that facilitates our worship in a warm and wonderful way. Now, I've been to some Quaker meeting houses. If you go to a university town in North America, there's a fair chance that in a house a few blocks from campus, there will be on Sunday morning some friends gathered to worship, using that house as a meeting house. That was true when I started attending meeting in 1969 or 70 in Raleigh. On Woodburn Avenue, and it was true in Little Rock. It's been true any number of places. And that's sort of this category. And this other category of places where we worship is in the backside of a big church that has extra room, some non-Quaker group. Most dramatically in the tower of Riverside Church, just north of Columbia University. You go up I don't know. It seems like forever in the elevator, and and you can see it seems like the whole world. And there was a time when it was true in Winston-Salem. There was a time when it was true. There was a time when it was true in Little Rock after they moved from the house. That category. If you've been to meeting in Charlotte or in Durham or in Annapolis, Maryland, or in Kingston, Jamaica, you can sit and the windows are so large and so dominate the walls that it feels as if you're outside and that the world has, the natural world has come into where you're worshiping. In Kingston, there's not actually a wall and windows. It's just open, but it's the same feeling, and it's great. But we all have our preferences about things, and my notion is that if you go to Jordan's England, where Isaac Pennington is buried, or you go to Oxford, England, or Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Arch Street or Race Street in Philadelphia, there's this similar feeling from the architecture and the attention to what people do there. This kind of worship that reaches not just to God, but also to one another, that is reflected in the space. And it has been suggested to me that if at the beginning of those 25 years of consideration, the decision had immediately been to build a meeting room, we would not have this meeting room. We would have one that reflected, and you can find them here in town. You can find them at Glenwood. You can find it at on Spring. Well, you could find it on Spring Garden Street. It's Burger King now, and you can find it even in Richmond, Virginia, where meeting is held in a church that was a historically Black church for a lifetime, and then is a Quaker meeting now, that reflect more nearly a Protestant, perfectly reasonable place to have worship, but that isn't tuned to what we do or what we try to do, what we hope to do, what we need help doing sometimes. But as it was, the kind of building of this building to enhance worship, and I've been involved in this, but I talked later to the Philadelphia Quaker architect who had done many meeting houses, several years later, and I believe the fullness of time has shown that we went the right way. Have you ever tried to explain waiting worship, open worship, silent worship to someone who had not experienced it? You say we sit in silence, people wait for the Spirit to move them. If the Spirit moves them, or if they believe it does, they will stand and they will speak. And people ask questions about this little sketch of this wondrous thing, and at some point, many of them will say, well, how do you keep on subject? How do you keep people from taking over this process and standing up and talking about something that doesn't have anything to do? And of course, the answer is that the real answer is that we don't. And I remember when I was first among friends, and a Baptist seminarian showed up one morning and talked way too long, bringing perfectly reasonable messages that no one there wanted to hear or felt fed or nourished by. And I was new to this process, and it just irritated me. But it's, the lore here is that sometime before my time in New Garden began, this man stood up, and as what he may have perceived as a message, proceeded to disrobe. The story is that some people stood up around him to screen him from meeting for worship, and that basically he was gently encouraged to move out, and worship and life went on. At Washington, Friends Meeting in Washington, on Florida Avenue, our lore is the stories we hear and retell. But this part of the lore of that meeting made it into the Washington Post, where this woman stood in the open worship and described her evening before in a level of detail and intimacy that did not, in many people's minds apparently, add to their worship experience. The reason, it seems to me, that this doesn't in fact take over worship is that people continue to either look for or try their best to look for that of God in those people who are distracting in the moment. And that's the distinctive. And I don't mean that that's, maybe we're also peculiar that looking for that of God in each other when it's difficult is something we're practiced at. I don't know, but it is, I believe, an important part of that lore, and that and the foundation that creates for us to think about how we deal with one another and with the divine in worship. Let's talk about baptism for a moment. Now, generally, when I'm asked by a non-Quaker about baptism, my answer is, we don't do that. We don't believe it's necessary to have outward signs of something that has happened within, and that indeed it's often a distraction. Well, Quakers in Jamaica baptize. And the clerk of Jamaica Yearly Meeting explained, you know, it's so much a part of the culture that that's just not the place to distinguish ourselves. That's the place to embrace the world we live in. In Nepal, not only do Quakers baptize, it is as I am told, a very public to the wider community event where it is an acknowledgement that one is leaving one's family and seizing upon this approach to the divine, different from the larger culture and their family, and that it is such a fundamental break in your relationship with the society around you that they believe public is the way to do it. Let me share a piece of the lore from a friend's meeting about an hour away. This family started coming to meeting and joined, and they had, I don't know, 3 or 4 kids, and they joined in the appropriate way. But the youngest of the children was a little girl, and she, in their former church and religious life, had never been baptized. All the other members of her family had been baptized in this other tradition. And it weighed upon her. And she didn't want to be on the other side of some line like that from her siblings and her parents. And she talked to the minister, and this question of baptism for this girl in these circumstances was taken to ministry and council. Clearness committee appointed. Some representative talked with the girl, went back to ministry and council. This process, of course, took months. I can tell people believe that. It took months. And by the time it reached its conclusion, what had happened is that she and her spiritual life and her thinking about this had moved on and did not need this anymore. But the decision was to baptize her if that, under these circumstances where that was what, at the beginning of the process, she had needed for to feel supported in her religious and spiritual life. So maybe what she needed wasn't baptism. Maybe what she needed was for this issue to be taken seriously by people who cared about her and cared about her spiritual life in a way that they would meet Thursday evening at 7:30 for an hour and a half about what this 11 or 12-year-old girl was experiencing. So do friends baptize? Well, in Jamaica and Nepal and nearby here, when circumstances reach out for that possibility. Friends will. So with the use of the mirror of how we treat others, what do we look like? How do we treat the one who thinks we should keep this corner to be part of our grounds rather than using it to address the financial needs of the moment? How do we treat those who share too much in length or topic or detail in meeting? How do we treat those who bring a message out of the silence that speaks to someone else, but not on that day to me? The disrobing doesn't happen very often, but the not being prepared this morning for the message that some particular person brings out of the silence, and to treat them with as we would wish to be treated. That's different. How we treat the child whose seeking of a relationship with God takes a form that we find inconvenient. That we treat, do we treat that question as unimportant, or do we focus on that child as being very important and treating her in a way that reflects that? So the priest says, the priest in the village says that we are most clearly represented by the image that appears as we treat others. Let us pray that our image reflects the divine.